So this made us some headlines, and I always know that there's something going to be coming up when I get asked about it at my other line of work. And that would happen to be the comments we had from Duce Staley, running backs coach and assistant head coach for the Detroit Lions, as he maybe challenged DAndre Swift. So DAndre Swift, on background, has missed 7 games in his first 2 seasons. 4 last year with the injured shoulder. I believe he had a concussion in his history as well, and those are concerns. But Duce is we know how big the run game is for Detroit's identity, or what they want their identity to be. And when Swift is in the backfield, it is a difference. Swift is a 4+ yards per attempt average. Do I have that right, Jeremy?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, just making sure. I blanked for a second. Running back, and he is the engine that Detroit counts on to make the run game work. So Duce Staley came out this week and said injuries happen. But one of the things Swift and I had a conversation about is you've got to be able to play through some of those injuries as a running back. We all know there is a difference between being hurt and being injured and being hurt. As soon as you step in this building as a running back, day one training camp, you're not going to feel the same. There will be some things you have to fight through. It's on one hand, it's very steady kind of old school football talk, especially the, are you injured or are you hurt? And to a degree, there is truth that you are going to be playing through hurt a lot playing American football. But Jeremy, like, knowing the importance of the running back position, knowing that Duce is kind of, I'm not going to say he's calling him out, but he's speaking to what I believe are some realities of the game. But I think you see this a little bit differently.
Well, there's a couple things to this. There is how it relates to Duce Staley, or I'm sorry, to DAndre Swift, and let's start there, because I do think he's kind of more or less calling him out, and he did try to backpedal a little bit later in the conversation, saying like, "Oh, you guys asked me about DAndre Swift. I have this conversation with everybody," and he was asked directly, like, "Do you think there were any opportunities last year DAndre Swift could have played but didn't?" And he said, "I don't know that. There's no way I could know that. I won't ever know that." But this is not the first time I've heard veiled criticisms about DAndre Swift about this exact thing. This is not the only person. This is the only person who I've heard say it publicly in front of the media, which is, it's a thing. Like, to say that in front of the media. And listen, the one thing about this coaching staff is they will never have a conversation with the media that they already have not had with the players themselves. And he said he had the conversation with DAndre Swift, and he said he took it well and all that sort of stuff. But this is a very real, like, you weren't tough enough last year. And I know he didn't phrase it that way, and he never would, but that's essentially what he's saying. And
it is a challenge to him. It is a challenge to him.
Yeah.
But I see it kind of as a former player to a player challenging them.
Right.
Which I know that again, we talk about these guys are former players in the NFL. That carries specific weight when it is a former NFL 100%. Running back telling you that you weren't available.
100%. And yeah, I think you can only have those sort of conversations, those really tough conversations, when you do kind of carry that, validity to you, that you've seen it, you've fought through it, you've done it yourself. So I know you can do it.
It's a challenge to be better.
Right. And listen, like, there's nothing necessarily inherently wrong with challenging your players to play better. I do think maybe there is a conversation to be had about whether this is an appropriate conversation to have with an employee, though. Like, just saying, like, you're hurt, I still expect you to play. In a league where they are trying to promote player safety, and he's not asking him to play while he's injured. Right. I do believe there's a difference. But it's just, I don't think it's a good look, first of all. And I think we can have a conversation about whether that's an appropriate or something that you should be encouraging your players to do. Now, I know one of the major points, and it's one I don't want to overlook, is everyone's playing hurt in some sort of way, right? This is the NFL. Everyone's going to have nicks and bruises and pulls and things like that. But we're entering kind of an era in which players are taking more autonomy of their own health and their own business decisions and things like that. And so there's kind of this clash here with like an old school mentality of like rub some dirt on it and get back in, and new school mentality with the players, which is like, I want to be able to walk when I'm 50. And so this kind of like, this is at the crux in between those two arguments, like pitchforking both ways, because I do see it both ways. Like, obviously he's not going, I don't think Duce Staley wants DAndre Swift to risk his long-term health in any sort of way, but he might be encouraging that unintendedly.
Yeah, well, to your point, Jeremy, I think that you see these business decisions being made across the NFL, but maybe there's no position where it would be more apt to be looking out for your health than running backs,
Sure.
Right? I mean, how many running backs are making it to their second contract and being worth it? The list is very small.
Yes.
It's easier to point out the guys that are worth that than the guys that aren't worth it. So, the thing about Swift though is, I mean, I'm vaguely remembering. I think training camp he had the groin injury, right? That was lingered
into the season,
and then it was the AC joint injury that he had shoulder, in the Bears game that knocked him out for a few weeks there. I think it's totally. I'm behind what Duce Staley's doing for the only reason that you mentioned, Jeremy, is that this conversation happened before with DAndre Swift than when it happened with the media. And that's why I don't view it as him calling him out. I view it as Duce Staley kind of relaying to the media, like, hey, this is a conversation we had and we're on the same page.
Sure.
So that's where I'm at with it. It doesn't feel at all like he's calling him out. Even though it is being done publicly, I think it's just that transparent conversations that have been happening between the coaching staff and the media.
It's kind of that weird, and maybe that's what is taking at least me getting used to, is like, okay, you have those. I think we're so used to those conversations happening behind closed doors and staying behind closed doors.
Yeah, there isn't this veil of secrecy being, hung over this franchise.
And some people, I think, view that secrecy as respect, at least in cases like this. Some people view the transparency as a respect thing to the fans and media. And so it's kind of a balance there. But I think that's a good point to make, that like at least they're having these conversations beforehand before they're saying, hey, you got to be tougher to the media.
Best availability to Ryan. A question for you, Jeremy. If this happened, if they say just instead of rather just talking to the media about it, if this showed up on, like, I guess to your point, if this showed up as like kind of a behind the scenes thing on Hard Knocks, I don't think anyone would blink twice about it. Even if it's like being, behind the scenes, but also kind of not behind the scenes in that fake behind the scenes of Hard Knocks.
Right.
I feel like, I think it's, we're all kind of getting used to the transparency. And again, sometimes it gets certain guys in trouble. Like Dan Campbell definitely got raked a little bit about, the comments last year with Jared Goff.
Sure.
And I'm sure he had those conversations with Jared Goff before he spoke to the media. But yeah, I don't think Duce Staley is calling him out. Again, I have to cleave to this idea that it is a former player, and former players. I agree with Ryan. Like, there is a bit of a generational divide here, but I think also he understands that he wants DAndre Swift to play hard, because that's how you earn that second contract. Like, it's a weird catch-22 of trying to earn that second contract. Like, you can't just preserve yourself too much, because you'll end up in a situation, a different position. But take Kenny Golladay. Kenny Golladay preserved himself so much, and I guess he got a bunch of money, but he preserved himself so much that
he ended up in New York.
He ended up in.
He's probably not going to see the end of that contract.
He's not going to see he's not going to see a third contract. He's not going to see a third contract. Is my point. Yeah. Like you can't just hide yourself away, especially if you're a running back. You have to have some sort of production at the same time.
And just explicitly draw that line, right? Like, Duce Staley is a former running back.
Yeah. Like, yes, in the NFL, the shield itself.
He understands that, like, every play that you're getting the ball, and even a lot of the plays where you're not getting the ball, it's like you're in a car accident. I think Reggie Bush, when he was with the Lions, he said something to that similar effect of like, like every play is like being in a car accident.
Yeah. 10
Duce Staley said
that.
Duce Staley said that last week. So guys are going 70, 89 or 18, 19, 20 miles per hour, crashing into each other.
Right.
But does the old school mentality bother you guys at all? Like the whole like play through injuries, like that's just how it works in the NFL. Do you think?
No,
do
man.
you think
Like
there's any old schoolness to that maybe needs to be phased out of the NFL mentality?
Look, man. At some point, the sausage has to be made. Like I can't. I know there's more concern about it, but at the same time, maybe I'm jaded because like in a different sport, and I think Ryan will appreciate this, like the Ben Simmons conversation poisoned a lot of us. And I think sometimes like for those who don't know, in the NBA, Ben Simmons sat out a long time with the 76ers, got traded to the Nets, and sat out even through a playoff series. I guess we later found out he did have some back injuries, but at that point it was almost like boy crying wolf a little bit too much. Some people just refused to believe him. And like, and you had former players in the NBA calling out Ben Simmons. And in the NFL, that code of toughness is jacked up to 11. It's jacked up to 11 that you have, because it is such a collective mentality that you being available helps your team win, which helps everyone else raise the tide and all ships rise with that tide. Like when your team wins, it helps everyone out financially too. Like everyone gets better contracts if your team is going to the Super Bowl, or you get to say after your playing career that you were a Pro Bowler, or you have a Super Bowl ring, or you made playoff chases. Like that helps you. So like it is a team sport that requires everyone to really buy in. And when you're talking about running backs, you were talking about 50% of your offense in some cases, that it is such an element that you need your lead back, and DAndre Swift is the lead back. You need him out there. Like I know that you don't want to ruin a guy's career so much, but there is kind of that expectation of sacrifice that I think isn't just completely, I don't know if I can still call it old school. I still think that's current school too. Like, and I know players are looking out for themselves more and more, but it's what's expected of you from other people in the locker room. And it's what is expected of you from the coaches. And it's what's expected of you. It's expected from everyone. And like, I don't think that in this case, it really takes a back seat. I don't want them to be stupid about it. I don't want them to be reckless about it, but I think we can understand the difference between reckless and having a collective mentality, that the collective good outweighs the individual.
Well, speaking of injuries, do we want to start talking about Jeff Okudah?
Yeah, we can talk about that. I don't know if you guys have anything else to add to the
not really. I mean, I think I mostly agree with you guys there. It's just it's weird to just hear someone say that publicly. You know, it's kind of saying the quiet part out loud, right? Of players should play through injuries, and I think we all secretly know that they do anyways, but I think you made a really salient point, Chris, which is like, it's almost part of the NFL contract. Like everyone on that field is playing through something, so you better join the club. Otherwise, I mean, I'm the person who always says running backs are mostly replaceable. So if you're not willing to be out there and play through something, there are a line of 40 guys who can take your spot.
Like, yeah, like this is, I hate to say it, but like, and I want to be sensitive on concussions, but at the same time, like at this point, when you're playing football, everyone knows what you're signing up for at this point. You're signing up for pain in exchange for riches. You're going to have to go through some of it. It's part of the gladiator sport. It's sick and twisted, but the NFL wouldn't exist without it. Yeah. Football wouldn't exist without it.
This is the ugly side for sure.
Yeah. It's how the sausage gets made, man.